Hello, everyone. My name is Yanis Benamor, and I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Health Promotion via Digital Solutions Among Young Refugees. The Center for Sustainable Development was created in 2016, and our goal is to develop innovative solutions to reach the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. To that end, in 2019, we launched the REACH project, Refugees Act and Communicate for Health, because we believe that the Sustainable Development Goals cannot be reached by 2030 unless we help mitigate the current refugees and migrant crisis. The goal of the REACH project is to develop a digital solution to provide health information and facilitate healthcare access to refugees, migrants, and local youth in Turkey and Lebanon. And you'll hear more about this project in just a few moments. This project would not have been possible without the collaboration of fantastic partners, Columbia Global Centers, Istanbul Biriz Association, and Istanbul University, just to name a few. I also want to acknowledge the financial contribution of the President's Global Innovation Fund of Columbia University that has funded part of the REACH project and is making today's webinar possible. And now, to say a few words on behalf of their organizations, I want to welcome İpek Cemtaha from CGC Istanbul and İnanç Sambululu from Biriz Association.
Good evening, good morning, everyone. A warm welcome from Columbia Global Centers Istanbul. We are one of 9 centers across the globe established by Columbia University. Our aim is to connect the local with the regional and global, and to deepen the nature of the global dialogue. We live in an increasingly complex and divided world, and are in need of more collaborative projects like REACH. Within this context, we have been very delighted to take part in this online panel and photography exhibition, and to cooperate with esteemed institutions like yourselves. It has been almost a year that the pandemic exposed the disparities between disadvantaged populations and the rest of society in profound ways. And access to health services has been one of these extreme disparities. Now, as the world emphasizes the importance of health literacy and public health, REACH stands out as a very timely initiative. And we hope that through the mobile application, REACH, refugees' access to health information and services will improve significantly. I would like to also share our excitement on the new collaboration with Columbia Global Centers Amman to carry out a similar project in Jordan. The aim is to build an international research network among young professionals in forced migration settings. A special thank you to Yanis and Özge for their work and leadership on this project on the Columbia side.
Excited now, but maybe I can say that we have different refugees projects. For example, one of them is related Syrian children and to reduce their discrimination in the school environment to promote their social inclusion. And also the other is related civil societies professionals, which was aim is developing, increasing their, I'm really sorry for this. So we are very happy to share our experience with REACH team, and it was wonderful experience for us too. Maybe I can say now only this.
Thank you so much, İnanç. It was a pleasure working with you, and it continues to be. And now, finally, on behalf of Istanbul University, Professor Selma Karabey, who is also a panelist on this webinar.
Hi, Yanis. Good evening and good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting to this excellent webinar. On behalf of Istanbul University, I would like to sincerely express that we are honored to be a part of this wonderful project, actually. In October, I'm sure some of you should know it, a joint European and World Public Health Congress and also the World Health Summit were held to important international global activities. And there were many sessions in the field of digital health in both congresses. So I believe that it is highly valuable to take part in this trend and move it forward. We hope and believe that digital health will contribute to reducing health inequalities in the field of immigrant health as in other areas. As Istanbul University, we want to express our gratitude to Columbia University for the support it provided in the realization of this project. And we hope to be able to cooperate in similar projects in the future. Thank you, Yanis.
Thank you so much, Professor Karabe. So to all of the attendees, just a little bit of housekeeping. Throughout this webinar, you will be able to ask any question you want using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. For today's session, the chat has been disconnected. So let me give you a brief outline of today's webinar. We will start off with Dr. Gulin Samari, who will tell us about research methodologies in refugee populations and give us a regional overview. Followed by Dr. Özge Karadakaman, who will specifically talk about the REACH project and the photo voice methodology that we used for our research. Then we will invite you to the virtual photo exhibit, which originally was supposed to be in a gallery in New York, but obviously for COVID reasons, this had to be canceled. Then Professor Karabe will come back and tell us her perspective as a local researcher and her involvement with the project. We will then hear from Damla Ceyhan, who will give us the perspective from local youth working on this project. And finally, we're very lucky to have Mr. Firas Kayal from UNHCR, and he will tell us about the use of mobile technologies for health in refugees and migrant population, and he will give us a global overview. So before we start, I just wanted to give you a few words of background for those of you who may not be very familiar with the topic. So forced migration has been one of the most significant consequences of man-made and natural disasters throughout history. For neighboring countries, forced migration can burden and disrupt systems. At an individual level, refugees and other forced migrants face challenges with respect to safe living conditions, access to healthcare, education, employment opportunities, and social well-being. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees, High Commissioner has called the Syria emergency the biggest humanitarian and refugee crisis of our time. Since the start of the 2011 civil war in Syria, an estimated 6.6 million people have been displaced inside Syria, and an additional 5.6 million people have fled to other countries. More than 90% of the people fleeing Syria have sought asylum in 3 countries, Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. Currently, Turkey has the highest number of refugees in the world, with a majority being Syrian, about 3.6 million. And the common barriers to healthcare access are availability, affordability, geographic accessibility, acceptability, and quality. And they're exacerbated for refugees living in foreign countries and out-of-camp settings. So we have chosen to focus on young people because they are represent about 61% of the refugees under 25-year-old, and there's an estimated 820,000 refugee youth between the ages of 15 and 24 that are living in Turkey. So our project, which is a research project, was trying to understand what are the barriers that prevent refugee youth and local youth from accessing healthcare information and also accessing healthcare in general. Anyone who's been involved in research with human subjects understands the complexity, but working with refugees and migrants adds another level of complexity because they are vulnerable populations. So to give us a little perspective on research methodologies of working with migrants and refugee population, I want to welcome Dr. Gulin Samari. Dr. Gulin Samari is a public health demographer and assistant professor in the Helbrun Department of Population and Family Health, the program on forced migration and health, and the program on global health justice and governance at Columbia Mailman School of Public Health. Her research focuses on how social inequities on the basis of migration, gender, race, and religion shape population health, paying specific attention to population in and from the Middle East, and North Africa. And she has over 15 years of experience working on health issues in the region. Dr. Samari was the first to draw attention to Islamophobia and racialization of religious minorities as a public health issue. Her work also considers how political and policy shifts shape demographic aspects of migration, xenophobia, migrant families, and subsequent health behaviors and outcomes. She has received several awards for her early career contributions to health equity research. Gulin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yannis. Thank you for that nice introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share some slides. Can you see those, Yannis?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to expand a little bit on the introduction that Yannis gave and focus on sort of the research that has been done on forcibly displaced populations, in particular in the Middle East and North Africa. So a little bit of background. So forcibly displaced populations in the Middle East and North Africa, there's been a dramatic flood of refugees really in the last 15 years. So this is really from the wars in Syria and Iraq, and they have produced the greatest share of refugees. North African states and Turkey have really emerged as key transit hubs along with European transit locations. So this is not sort of new to the region. Episodes of forced migration have shaped a good deal of the Middle East and North Africa, especially after post-World War II. But this recent influx has really impacted sort of research, programmatic, and humanitarian efforts in the region. And so, as Yannis explained, there's been 5.6 million Syrians who've left the country, while another 6 million have been internally displaced. And as we know, a lot of this movement is to neighboring countries. So Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan are the most impacted, with less of an impact in Europe, but about 1 million refugees that have made it to Europe now. So along with this sort of influx of refugees to neighboring countries, there's also been what I call the refugee research enterprise. So research is important and it can help inform the humanitarian response to the Syrian crisis. But the region was really flooded with researchers of various skill sets conducting research on Syrians and other refugees that weren't necessarily familiar with sort of the ethical constraints around doing work with forced migrants. So much of this work ends up being problematic and only serving researcher interests because, for example, like Syrians who participate in unauthorized research projects are threatened with deportation. So it has ethical implications for the populations that the research is ultimately trying to serve. So this is just a glimpse at the hundreds of articles that have appeared in the refugee and health space. So I want to just touch on that briefly and with particular attention to the region. So from 2000 to 2015, there was over 2,500 publications on forced migration and health. And as you can see from this figure, there was a steep increase in publications after 2011. And so that's a direct correlation with the Syrian civil war. On this figure, I'm showing you the blue line represents publications that are about refugees in the Middle East. So again, we see evidence of the Syrian refugee crisis really driving research in this space in the region. And interestingly enough, the United States and Turkey are the most represented among the researchers who are doing this work. So again, this is just numbers showing the same thing. This is numbers of publications specifically on Syrian refugees and displaced people over time. And as you can see, it's sort of increased exponentially year to year. So when you think about refugee research, health research globally, these investigations are really conducted during displacement. Majority of them are cross-sectional in design. And only about under 14% of them really include interventions for the population. So the data collection methods that are used tend to be 42% are surveys or they use questionnaires, 33% use interviews, and 9% use focus groups. So the health focus is largely mental health. So a lot of this work is really focused on mental and psychosocial health, followed by access to healthcare. There's some need for chronic disease investigations and things like that. But I think what's really striking when we look at this body of work, particularly amongst Syrian refugees in the region, is that a lot of the sustainability mechanisms are not taken into consideration. So you have this quote from this article that really says, given the exploitative nature of most of the investigations included, sustainability of interventions was limited after the project completions, with many investigators bringing their screening equipment or other supplies for use during data collection. So data collection tools that might have served the population are then taken away upon the end of funding cycle for the researcher or humanitarian group. So similar to because Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey are most frequently used as research sites for refugee health studies, because that's where the largest influx of refugees were. But I think it's important to note that to make ethical research choices for the research project, researchers really have to fully engage and understand the political and legal context in which refugee communities live. And ultimately, there's some tension between the need for data to inform evidence-based practices and the need to protect vulnerable refugee populations from research-related risk. So ethical challenges include things like unequal power relations, legal precariousness, poverty, violence, politicized research contests, and the policy relevance of the research question itself. So when I'm thinking about ethical approaches to refugee research, I think that the guiding principles should be building partnerships and do no harm. And there's a lot of ethical decisions that have to be made surrounding inclusion of refugees as partners in the research, but really refugees should help conceptualize projects from the beginning, from within the countries that the project is going to occur, because this will provide an opportunity to take into account the values, lifestyle, and cognitive and affective world of the subjects. Then training the refugees to be part of the research team comes with a whole host of ethical decisions there as well, because there's work permit issues and legal issues that have to be navigated. But it's good if refugees can be involved in the research team. And ultimately, you need to have a dissemination plan that involves refugees. So if you collect information on refugees, you should be able to exactly show how that information is going to benefit that group. And so methods like photo voice, for example, can be powerful ways of actually engaging refugees through a community-based participatory approach, because they can bring insights into overlooked issues and aspects in the community. So again, qualitative approaches really allow for greater representation of refugee perspectives, but something that people don't often think about is the potential of re-traumatizing refugees through those types of interviews. So it's something to be conscious of, and what resources are those refugees going to be connected to, what mental health services are going to be available. And I always advise people to really not outsource data collection to research or survey companies. You don't have any control of the sort of ethical boundaries of that work. So really sort of in summary, collaborating with refugees to inform the work, using the research to better refugee lives. And I think a lot of times this last link is mixed. Like we have all these great, publications and papers that have come out and research projects that have come out of the region, but which one of those projects is really connected to creating policies, programs, and advances in the refugee lived experience? And I always like to sort of tell folks that, researchers really should practice cultural humility, which moves beyond cultural competence and really acknowledging your own implicit bias and what you bring to a research situation. And so this applies to refugee health research as well. So in conclusion, the refugee context continues to change. We're 10 years into the Syrian civil war practically, and we constantly need to be thinking about the ethics principles that's guiding that work, especially, now that it's evolving in the COVID-19 pandemic as well. And then ethical and community-informed research actually plays an essential role in better understanding healthcare needs of displaced Syrians. So it is a way that we can actually improve accessibility, acceptability, and effectiveness of healthcare responses if we leverage appropriate and ethical approaches. And with that, I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Colleen, for this really insightful presentation that reminds us that it is a partnership between, the population and the researchers, that it should not be just a helicopter type of project that benefits only the researchers, that at the end of the day, policies and tools should be created to help the population that really we are supposed to be serving. with that said, we are now moving specifically to the project under consideration today, the REACH project. And I want to invite Dr. Özge Karadakaman to tell us a little bit more about the REACH project and the photo voice methodology that we used for this project. So Dr. Özge Karadakaman works as a public health researcher at the Center for Sustainable Development. She holds an associate professor of public health title in Turkey with over 12 years of research and teaching experience in different higher education settings. Dr. Karadakaman earned her medical degree at Istanbul University and her MSc and PhD degrees in public health at Hacettepe University in Turkey. She also holds a postgrad degree in health promotion from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Dr. Karadakaman has more than 15 years of experience working in multidisciplinary teams to conduct research, develop public health policies and programs for different vulnerable disadvantaged groups. Her main research interests are vulnerable disadvantaged populations and health inequalities, health promotion and education, migrant refugee health, community mental health, stigma and discrimination. Without further ado, Özge, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'll be giving information about the project in general, and then I will try to focus on the photo voice methodology. So the REACH project is an initiative of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, and it's a regional initiative covering Turkey, Lebanon, and hopefully we'll start working in Jordan as well. So as you all know, many people, young people, face barriers in accessing youth-friendly health information and healthcare, and there are many factors, of course, in play. And there is a need to implement more innovative, more youth-friendly, and widely used solutions to increase health literacy and access to healthcare. So Refugees Act and Communicate for Health project is a regional initiative which aims to bridge the gap in health literacy and healthcare access for both refugee and disadvantaged local youth. And this initiative is supported by Taiwan ICDF, Blue Chip Foundation, and Columbia University. And based on local needs in each country, REACH works with refugee and local youth, software developers, academia, local health authorities, UN organizations, and NGOs to develop a multilingual mHealth application to increase health literacy and improve healthcare access among young refugee and host communities. REACH will aim to assess the effectiveness of the REACH app and to contribute to the limited evidence base on using health technologies. So here is a snapshot of the REACH app and some of its sections. So the app is still being developed right now, and it will be available very soon. When I come to the PGIF funded project as a complementary project to the REACH initiative, the title is Health Promotion via Digital Technologies Among Young Refugees in Turkey. So the aim is to use a community-based participatory research approach to explore and promote use of digital technologies among young refugees in Turkey. The partners are Columbia University, Columbia Global Centers Istanbul, Istanbul University, and BIRIZ Association in Turkey. And you will see the research team from Columbia University, Istanbul University, and BIRIZ Association. When we come to the method, so in this particular project, we aim to have a qualitative photo voice study with young refugees and local youth. And also we conducted in-depth interviews with refugee youth, refugee health and youth service providers and policymakers to assess the current trends and gender-specific needs for digital tools, including mobile apps, websites, and other tools to assess health information and services among refugees. And then, of course, the project included a photo exhibition and a panel to share study findings and to raise awareness on the potential of digital technologies. And we also had a research capacity building training on qualitative methods in migration research for young public health researchers in Turkey. So I also would like to give some information about the photo voice methodology itself. In the early 1990s, Dr. Caroline Wang from the University of Michigan developed photo voice, which is a research method designed to empower members of vulnerable groups by giving them a chance to tell their stories and have their voices heard. The participants take photographs of their everyday realities concerning the research topic. They participate in group discussions, just like in focus group discussions about their photographs and their meanings for them. And the participants and the research team then work together to reach out to policymakers, health planners, and community leaders to create a social change. So our own photo voice study took place in Istanbul on January and February 2020, just before the pandemic actually began in those areas. And we worked with 4 youth groups, in total 40 young people in Istanbul. 31 of them were refugees, and there were also 9 local youth, 27 male and 13 female participants. Here are some photos. This is from one of the first meetings with the research team, local research team, and the young participants. They're discussing the methodology, the photo voice methodology, and how to take photos and the ethical aspects when they are in the field. And this is a photo from the field. So we worked with a professional photographer who is also a lecturer at Koç University in Istanbul. So the photography lecturer is in the field with one of the youth groups. And then this is a photo from one of the group discussions where the young people discuss their photos and of course the meaning of photos for them, again from other discussion groups. And here I would like to close this one and would like to continue with the photos, the exhibition photos. So here you will see that we tried to combine the photos that young people took with some quotes from the group discussions. So these quotes are related to the photograph itself. And I actually would like to read it quickly. So from Ali, he says that a friend of mine works in the garment business. He cannot lift anything because he has constant immobility in his arm. Since he is registered in another city, he cannot visit a doctor for free. An undocumented migrant who does not speak Turkish, works in difficult conditions, and lives in the workplace. A 13-year-old boy who does not attend school but works. These children can easily buy energy drinks and alcohol from the grocery store. I ate potato chips the other night. I got up in the morning and saw a pimple on my face. This is a real situation. It happens to everyone. This is the Grand Bazaar. Do you see how many people there are? This is just one street. Everyone goes to different directions. I would be very embarrassed if I would have done this job. I can't do this job. A child working 10 hours a day and needs surgery due to a problem in his throat. Different working hours can be arranged to increase access to healthcare for young people who go to school or work. There's a need for more youth-friendly health services. When planning health services, young people who can never leave home should also be considered. For example, a young girl who is not allowed to leave the house, a teenager living with a disability, or a stigmatized young person. It is critical to involve young people in decision-making processes. Let the young people color this gray world. Our teens smoke a lot. I do not smoke, but a friend of mine is smoking and continuously offering me cigarettes. This is a dorm. Friends sit and smoke hookah for an hour every single day. It is very harmful. My friend is 22 years old. Although he has children at home, he always smokes indoors. My 14-year-old sisters, they go to the hospital for treatment. We have debts to pay, but how much salary do we get anyway? The most precious thing in this life is health. It is the young ages when health should be most protected, but sometimes people miss this opportunity due to their living conditions. The best thing I do is to walk half an hour every day. There are things that worry me, and yoga helps me hear the sound of my soul. I feel stressed, I smoke a lot, and drink a lot of Coke to hold on to life. There were also some photos with no comment. She has a father, but he has just left her on the street. There are many children like this. This is my elder brother. We go to work at 8 a.m. and still work at 10 p.m. in the evening. I saw a poster about health and took its photo. On Sunday, it was holiday, but Turkish soldiers were martyred, and I did not leave the house to avoid any potential problem with the Turks. Which do you think is better to consume? Hookah smokers have a hard time walking and running. I do not smoke. It's a terrible thing. But when a smoker suffers an incident, he immediately thinks about smoking and lights a cigarette. Some of the young people have successful marriages. Some of them get divorced without harming each other. Others use alcohol or commit suicide when they get separated. Some young people are forced into marriage and their lives are ruined. Some of the young people go home late. Then they sit up late because there's no other time. Some young people go to school without doing their homework. He looks at his phone while eating, while doing sports, at work, and on the road. Our sports instructor recommends it to young people, but it is harmful. He advises it to make money for himself. A friend of mine used it to gain weight. It didn't work. I'm also slim. I do sports because I'd like to gain weight. Unfortunately, most young people cannot benefit from social services. In fact, it remains only in books, not in real life. This boy is 16 years old, plays with PlayStation for about 6 hours a day until 12 a.m. at night. He looks very unhealthy. He will be sick. He smoked so much that the color of the water turned black from the hookah smoke. Children are playing games on the phone or computer almost every minute. This is very harmful. Some of my friends have become tense because they played these games a lot. These are the districts where most refugees set up their businesses and live, and this is the most famous falafel restaurant. Migration gave us the opportunity to understand their culture, and we love their food, desserts, and stories. The reason I took this picture is that it gives the impression of the integration of migrants. It tells me about changeability, mobility, and fusion. It gives me a positive feeling. This photo is from Turkey-Greece border. Road can be the most meaningful word for the life of asylum seekers and refugees, a never-ending journey with the hope for a better life. And the last photo. Days that remind us that borders are more important than human life. It has been emphasized that the virus affected everyone, but vulnerable groups were the most affected by this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Özge, for presenting us these powerful photographs. I find it so fascinating that, when given the same assignment, stop sharing, please.
I'm trying to.
When given the same assignment, you get so many different results, from the very tragic to the hopeful. Some of them are showing, the living conditions. Some of them are showing addiction. Some of them are showing disease and the sometimes incapability of accessing health services. But then when, presumably from the local youth, the vision that I got from these photographs is more, this idea of integration, that the migrants are trying to be part of the population. So I found that to be really interesting. But to give us a more in-depth perspective about, participating in this research with the refugee youth and the local youth, I want to now invite Professor Selma Karabey to join us. Professor Selma Karabey is a professor of public health at Istanbul University. She currently serves as the chair of the working group on public mental health in the Association of Public Health Specialists in Turkey, and of the postgraduate education program on public health at the Istanbul Medical Faculty, and a member of the National Committee of Program Developing on Public Health Postgraduate Education. She has worked as a senior advisor of National Program on Multi-Sectoral Health Approach led by the Turkish Ministry of Health between 2011 and 2013. She has been acting as a board member of the Biriz Association, which is a CSO performing community mental health, as we have heard from Inanç earlier. Her major interests are mental health promotion and social policies in health. Professor Karabey, the webinar is yours.
Thank you, Yanis. I would like to talk about our reflections, actually, from local researchers, from us. But first of all, I would like to present my thanks to Inanç and Damla especially, because without them, it wouldn't be possible to carry out in such difficult conditions to these series of photo voice. And so they gave me so comfort, and they have taken a big load of the process. And really, I want to thank once again to Inanç and Damla. Was it easy job to carry out the photo voice phases of REACH project? Of course, is not. We have many challenges to overcome. I would like to share some of them, if you permit me. For instance, most of the young participants have negative life experiences, directly or indirectly, of course. And so it is not enough to say, come on, guys, we have just started a project. It is beneficial for your health. Come on, join us. Of course, it is not enough. For young people to come, first, you need to create a communication, a sincere communication based on trust. And so it is not an easy job, actually. And there is a lot of research on refugees, as Gulin said before. And therefore, refugees are both tired and suspicious. They are right, of course. For instance, they would say, will this research really benefit me? Or is it worth my time and effort? And so they need to be convinced that this project is a benefit for them. And therefore, this whole process of coming together and forming a group needs to be knitted loop by loop so that young people join the project. Happily, we could manage it thanks to, firstly, Inanç, because Inanç is a clinical psychologist, a dramatist, a group manager, and so, of course, with big help from Damla, They became a wonderful team, and they could manage the whole process very good. And of course, Özge was in United States in that time because although she is very far from Turkey, we felt that she's always with us, and she also managed very well from distant. We have another challenge is that some young people, they are working whole time, and they were only available on Sundays to meet. And so Inanç and Damla had to work on Sundays too during the photo voice study. As Özge said, we worked with 4 different photo voice groups. The information they provided regarding the participation of young people in the project and the content of the mobile application to be developed was so valuable. If I need to mention a little bit about the outputs regarding the content of our photo voice groups, we talked about a lot physical, social, and psychological health with young people through photos. You can see only some headings in these slides. Of course, there are many words about all of those headings, but we have short time, and so I will only mention some fields. For instance, in terms of physical health, the young people through photos said that the most important problems appearing on photos, sleeping problems. The young people have seriously sleeping problems. Also use of hookah, addiction to screen and smartphone use. As you see in the photos, protein powder use for bodybuilding and fast food, chips, soda consuming, etc. All of them are related to physical health. But of course, the young people have expressed or many problems on social and psychological health. It is quite understandable that one of the main problem is regarding the identity, also language barrier. Fortunately, young people can learn the language easier than the adults, but anyway, some of them have no time to learn the language. Long working hours, some financial problems, of course, housing conditions, and some of them are not able to continue education, and also they face some discrimination and marriage at an early age. In terms of psychological health, they expressed that very deep concern for the future, some suicidal opinions, things, ideas, or family members, for instance, they may have some disabilities. Once again, substance use, being away from loved ones, loneliness, stress, etc. They are some of the most expressed health problems faced by young peoples. And last but not least, I can say that during this process, both refugee and local young people have learned many from each other. This is very nice point, very nice output actually. And also, of course, we as a researcher have learned a lot from young people. And I can say that this was not only a study, but also a therapeutic experience for everybody in the process. They felt themselves better, and we felt ourselves better. And it was good for everybody. And of course, I would like to present my sincere thanks to Özge and to you, Yanis, for making this project possible. And of course, endless thanks to all young people for joining us and for opening their hearts to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Karabe, for helping us making this project possible and for your always positive attitude, even in the face of, sometimes very difficult situations that you had to deal with. I want to remind our audience, if you joined us late, that at any moment you can ask questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We have 2 more speakers, and then we'll be able to answer the question that you may have. Now, after hearing the perspective of a researcher, I now want to give the floor to Ms. Damla Ceyhan, who will give us the perspective of local youth. Ms. Damla Ceyhan is a dietitian by training and has graduated in 2017 from the Department of Nutrition and Dietetics at Istanbul University. She is one of the young researchers of the REACH project in Turkey. Damla is currently studying for a Master of Public Health at Istanbul University, and she is an SDG coordinator of Istanbul University as part of a program of the SDSN Youth. Damla, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yanis. Hello, I am Damla, and I am one of the young researchers of our project. And today I'm going to convey to you perspective from youth representative by my experience, actually. I'm so proud and happy today to be in here with these great panelists and speakers. I'm so proud. And I'm going to speak on behalf of my young friends today, actually. Before we started, I'd like to share a little story with you, actually. Yesterday, while I was thinking about this panel and preparing my speech, coincidentally, I heard a song from Ezhel. Ezhel is a young rap singer from Turkey, actually. He is a really influential and powerful figure. Rap is not my favorite genre, but I really got inspired by his song because while I was thinking about young people problem and health issues, he is literally talking about young problems: drug abuse, air and land pollution in cities, poor household conditions, barrier to access healthy food, young and unemployment, etc. Like our exhibitions. And when I listened to him, I really heard him and I understood what he is talking about. But when government listened to his songs, he went to jail. He's okay now, but anyway, I just want to share this example because if you don't try to understand young people, if you ignore them, you will exclude them from society. And in Turkish, the word teenager is used for people who are psychologically unstable or easily offended, but as kind of insult actually. When you do, teenagers, you leave them alone with their problems. And this is not true, actually. This is the worst thing to do. Fortunately, projects such as REACH and institutions like Columbia University and Istanbul University give young have an opportunity to their voices heard. You saw our photos a short time ago, and actually you heard us. This is a great experience for us, and maybe for you. Reach project actually is allow young participation from beginning to today. And I can say photo voice study is a really special experience for me because I have experienced the whole process with all 4 groups, both as a researcher and as a participant. And it was influential to me. We came together, we talked about our health problems, we discussed about our future in group discussion. Actually, it was like group therapy, thanks to Inaj, our supervisor. And we connected actually. We started to think together. We feel the same things at the same time. And absolutely, we saw and heard such stories, and sometimes we had some challenges, and it's hard to maintain. But I am optimistic because we connected and we encouraged each other to live together, actually. In brief, at the end of the day, we realized that we had so much in common, whether local or refugee. In fact, young people experience common problems, regardless of geography, language, or religion. And in this era of globalization, thanks to social media, actually, you can see how a young person from another country or another continent live their life, which problems they faced. And at that time, we can realize our peers are no different from us, actually. We love and react same things. We do not focus our differences because we have global problems like climate crisis, refugee crisis, like this. And I think we shouldn't waste our time to think about differences. I guess young people are better at solidarity, maybe because of the common issues and because of the globalization. I don't know. But I think we are better than uh, any other groups. And I think this is valuable for our future because um, young people are energetic and they are full of different skills actually, but maybe they don't know how can they canalize their energy and skills. When more experienced people like these wonderful people give them a hand and include them, they feel powerful to act actually, and that is what young people need. And I believe future needs youth energy and idealism. And also, we have to act for bright, healthy, and peaceful future. Um, also, with all due respect, dear more experienced people, please hear us and include us. Give us a chance to make the world a better place, actually. And I gave a social message and I can close now. Thanks for today. Again, thank you, Özge and his Professor Selma and Inanç for this opportunity. I'm very proud. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Damla, for this really powerful statement and reminding us, obviously, something that seems obvious to you. We need to be reminded. The problems of the youth doesn't matter where you are coming from. It is the problem that probably is related to your condition as youth, not the fact that you are a refugee or that you live in Turkey. And now, of course, being a refugee may, exacerbate these problems. Actually, when we started the designing the REACH project, originally it was focusing only on refugee and migrant youth, and having conversations with many experts, we were reminded of this necessity to also integrate the perspective of the local youth, because particularly from certain vulnerable groups in the local population, the problems are going to be the same. And so if you address it with one target population, you may as well just look at everybody, and you'll see a lot of similarities. And thank you, Damla, for reminding us that. So we are now closing the REACH section of this webinar, where we are looking at our particular project. And I now want to open it up again into a global perspective, looking at the use of digital and mobile technologies to try to help solve some of these issues of access to healthcare. So I want to call now Mr. Firas Kayal. Mr. Firas Kayal is currently the Senior Policy Advisor at the New York office of the UNHCR. Mr. Kayal holds a BA in law from Damascus University and a master's in international law from the School of Law at Washington University in St. Louis. His service with the UN Refugee Agency spans almost 20 years, working in many countries with large displacement operation, including Iraq, Yemen, the Gulf region, Sri Lanka, and Sudan. as well as in the UN headquarter locations in Switzerland and the United States. So in his last position, he headed the External Relation Unit at the Middle East and North Africa Bureau of the UNHCR headquarters for almost 5 years, during which time UNHCR was responding to large refugee displacement emergencies. In his current position in New York, Mr. Kayal works closely with UN agencies and departments, diplomatic missions to the UN Security Council members and donor countries on policy and advocacy matters related to refugees and displacement. Mr. Kayal, the webinar is yours.
Thank you very much, Yanis, and thank you for inviting inviting me to this distinguished event. And I'm really happy and honored to be with the panelists and talk about this very important topic. We've heard a lot of information and a lot of very good examples on how to assist the refugees in terms of providing them with health, and how local initiatives and regional international initiatives are helping. But here I want to give the panelists and the audience and everybody who's listening to us a little bit of global overview of what is it that we are dealing with right now in our world when it comes to displacement and displacement situations. So let me start by saying that I prepared a lot of remarks, already prepared, but now listening to your interventions, I will actually just leave everything that I prepared and start getting to the point directly. We are living right now in unprecedented times. We have never seen numbers of refugee and displacement around the world as much as we have now. As we speak, there are more than 79 million people displaced around the world, close to 80 million. The highest number that we've had since the end of World War II. Many are displaced in their countries, internal displacement. Millions others are displaced outside their countries. They're in refugee situations. And millions as well are on the move, trying to seek asylum, trying to reach safety and protection. On top of that, there are other millions of people who are stateless and do not enjoy any nationality. So it's really unprecedented times that we are living in. I can tell you from our own experience in UNHCR, these are the highest numbers that we have been dealing with in our history. We consider them a nation of displaced. We call them a nation of displaced because if they were to form a nation, they would be a country bigger than France or bigger than the UK in terms of the population. So you can imagine right now what is the situation that we are dealing with around the world in terms of displacement. So how to assist these people and how to provide them protection. My own agency, we are mandated basically to provide protection and solutions to these people, to the refugees. And we've been created, in fact, this year is our 70th anniversary. And when we were created 70 years ago, the world thought at the time that the refugee problem around the world and displacement problem will be solved in a matter of several years. So they actually gave us a 5-year mandate, a 5-year life. But that life continued to be extended every 5 years. And here we are right now, 70 years later, and we're still dealing with numbers that we have never seen before. So against this background, and against this massive number of displaced people around the world, we face, of course, many challenges when it comes to providing protection and assistance and durable solution to them. And I'm not going to go into most of these challenges, but of course, providing health is a major priority for us. And here I come closer to the topic that we are talking about here. There are a lot of challenges when it comes to providing health to refugees, and it goes from the emergency phases when the beginning of displacement takes place to when once refugees are more established in the countries of asylum, and as they move to finding solutions, whether they go back to their countries or they're resettled in a third country, health problems are continuously arising, have continuously risen during this time. And of course, we don't operate alone. We cannot provide health services to refugees on our own. In fact, no one agency can provide this massive assistance needed on its own. So we work in collaboration. We work primarily with governments, but also with institutions, with universities like yours, with health providers, and with NGOs, of course, local and international. And most recently, in fact, we started working with the private sector who can provide essential services and essential expertise, specifically in this digital age that we live in. And here I come to my next point in terms of the innovation that needs to be in place in order to provide health services in a new and innovative way. In our age, everybody has a mobile device. A lot of people are connected through the internet, either at home or while on the go. And refugees are also part of that population. So connectivity is really key for us and key for the refugees to be connected among themselves and with the communities they are hosted in. When you are connected, you have better access to information, you have better access to knowledge, and you would be able to make better and informed decisions on your current situation and on your future. And health is part of these decisions that you will be able to make better when you are connected. So we have had examples around the world when we used innovation and connectivity to provide really wonderful and new ways of providing health services. I can give you an example. We have refugees in very remote areas around the world. Some of them in refugee camps, many are in urban settings, and with the provision of internet, mobile devices, remote diagnostic tools, we've been able to connect these refugees with doctors on Skype, for example, or even doctors establishing and doing medical checks and diagnosis using remote devices. We started the project, for example, in, I think in a refugee camp we have in Asia in Nepal, refugees from Bhutan, and then the project grew and we realized that that can be actually replicated elsewhere in the world. So right now we have many, many examples of how, not just us, again, UNHCR, but how humanitarians and all those that are willing to help can be able to provide such services remotely. And here I come also to your project. Your project is an extremely important one and is actually a positive step towards helping the refugees in the Middle East region. Of course, the Middle East region hosts a large number of refugees, but like I said at the beginning, we have so many refugees around the world. So I would invite you to promote the project, to share the lessons learned, to share the success stories and the failures so that we and the people that are involved in this field can actually learn better and apply this elsewhere. And of course, I think Dr. Selma mentioned a very important point that I want to stress on here when we talk about health for refugees. Physical and mental health. And both are extremely important and key. And I stress here on the mental health needs of the refugees, because refugees have gone through really difficult times while trying to leave their countries, while they are on the move, before they reach protection and safety, and as they go through that very difficult journey. And we know examples from our regions how the refugees sometimes are able to cross the border with nothing with them except the very little belongings they have, or how they have sometimes crossed really and took dangerous journeys across seas and had to wait for a long time to apply for asylum. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that they go through very difficult times throughout this journey, and often this journey lasts for months, if not years. So mental health is a very important part of what we provide and what we do. Psychosocial support and psychological treatments are important, particularly when we talk about refugee children. And 40% of the refugee numbers around the world are actually refugee children. So it's really very difficult to try to provide these services alone. And here I call on you and on everybody who's listening to us to come together, to partner in collaboration with each other in order to provide expertise. Let's call it the coalition of the willing, if you will, where NGOs, doctors, physicians, volunteers, refugees themselves, anybody who has experience and expertise in providing psychosocial support and psychological treatment to refugees, we can actually make a difference. Because again, no one agency will be able to do that alone. And we have a huge number of traumatized children who went through terrible experiences and are still going through it as we speak. So that is a key area that we need to collaborate in, and we need to try our best to provide whatever we can. And of course, I know I have limited time, and it's a very, very wide subject, so I'm trying to use the time to the best of what we can provide here. But we cannot talk about health, of course, and without mentioning the situation that we and the whole world is in right now, the COVID pandemic, which actually also changed a lot of the rules of the game. And it affects everybody around the world, including refugees and displaced and asylum seekers around the world. Many of these refugees are in urban areas, millions of them. In fact, a large number of refugees are not just in camps in remote locations. They are in cities, in urban areas, living with the population and along with the host community. So the same restrictions that were placed on the population applies to them. And sometimes we have examples on restrictions applying even more on the refugees and the displaced. But that said, because of COVID, there are more than 150 countries that have placed restrictions on their borders, fully or partially closing their borders. And around 50 of them made no exceptions to people seeking asylum. So this adds to the vulnerability of the refugees. This increases their vulnerability, and therefore we actually have to continue to provide these essential services, including, if not more, during the times of COVID. Again, we have great examples from around the world on how to use mobile applications, digital connectivity, in order to provide refugees. In fact, when I talk about connectivity and digital information, I remember that during the Europe refugee crisis in 2015, I was in our headquarters in Geneva at the time, and we realized that these hundreds of thousands of people who were on the move, on the go, they were connected with each other over mobile app or a Facebook page or Instagram. And in fact, I myself signed up to that page then because I wanted to read and see the information about these refugees and where they're going and what their situation is. And I was struck with how easy, how accessible information in our digital age is if you are armed with the tools. And these tools can be from a simple mobile device with internet connection to more sophisticated telehealth clinics or remote diagnostic tools that we can use. But my point here, I guess, is that in our today's world, really the sky is the limit. And the methods and the ways that we thought could never have been helpful in the past are actually very helpful right now. And again, listening to your distinguished panelists and listening to the enthusiasm of the youth and the refugees and the professors and universities and all of us basically makes me really happy and positive about what change we can bring to the refugees if we try to deploy our knowledge, our innovation, and more assistance and protection to the refugees, which is the ultimate goal of all of us. There's a lot to talk about, but I will stop here and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Firas. Well, I was going to say, first of all, I'm sorry that your organization had to make it to 70. I guess that's kind of a bleak anniversary, but of course we're very happy and enthusiastic about the contributions of UNHCR. You were talking about mental health, and one of the things that Özge and I were lamenting about is the fact that our app actually wasn't ready in time when COVID hit, because it would have been a fantastic tool to disseminate messages of prevention for COVID, but also messages of mental health to help people go through it, and particularly refugees and migrants who you have pointed out were living the exact same realities as the local population, but of course, to an extent, even more difficult. So I now want to invite all of our distinguished panelists to switch on their cameras and come back to the floor. And I also want to invite all of our audience members to submit their questions in the Q&A section. And so while we are waiting for the questions, I want to start off with Gulin. You were making this really important point about, the impact that the research is supposed to have on the migrant and the refugee population. And I'm wondering whether there are, on the ethical review side, any mechanisms to prevent the type of helicopter research where basically it is only to the benefit of the researchers and not of the local population or the refugee population. And I'm wondering whether you've ever experienced that in the context of particularly a local ethical review board where they say this will have no positive impact. And then a follow-up question to that, what are sort of the advances that the research can have for policy with regards to the livelihood and the betterment of the lives of refugees and migrants?
Sure, these are really great questions. Thank you. So the first question about ethical review boards and IRBs is important, but one thing to realize is that universities and university entities like the Global Center and things like that go through an IRB process that's like, multiple layers like we went through for this work. For example, we went through the Columbia IRB and then local IRB partners. But a lot of the research that's been being done on Syrian refugees in the Middle East and North Africa is like rapid consulting firms that don't go through IRBs. And so there isn't that human subjects accountability. There isn't that checks and balances, which, we can talk about the flaws of IRBs. That's a longer discussion for another day, but at least it is intended to be an accountability mechanism. And a lot of the work, in health and otherwise that you see, and sort of like when researchers flooded the space, not all of them go through IRBs. They don't, that's just the reality. And they sort of do research without going through those ethical steps. And then on the second point about taking the research to really create policy changes, I think two things. One, it's important to hear before you start the research project, what the refugees actually want. So, I'm a health researcher by training, but when I was in Jordan talking to refugees about what their needs and wants were, they were all around education, livelihoods, and social protection mechanisms, So I ended up creating a research project that was around those things and then taking the findings from that work to the government, to multilateral agencies, and really like actually having targeted discussions and roundtable meetings with those entities, because that's the way that the policy change happens. It's taking the information that you got from the refugees, and instead of using that as an exploitative process where they feel like they're giving you information and getting nothing in return, you actually have a follow-up that says like, hey, we took this and presented it to X, Y, and Z entities to try to get changes, in your education system, in the work permit issues, all those things that they flag as important.
Thanks so much, Gurleen. I agree, actually. In our context, what we try to do with the REACH project is to make sure that there is visibility with local policymakers, with the government, Ministry of Health, to make sure that we immediately inform, the results from our research, and hopefully that it could basically better the lives of the refugees. I'm wondering if any of the panelists wants to add something to that question, or I can move on to the next one. So I'm going to go in the order, waiting for questions from the audience that apparently is very satisfied with our presentation. Everything is very clear. So Özge, you have been doing photo voice for quite some time, and this one is the latest that you have done as part of Columbia University for the REACH project, but you've been involved with photo voice in the past and on also refugee and migrant population. Do you feel that this round has brought a new light because the conflict in Syria is gone almost into its 10th year and the population, are integrating or not integrating? Is there some kind of evolution, or are we not seeing any change based on the results that you can share with us?
Thank you. So actually, my previous photo voice studies were, yes, with both refugee youth and then with also non-refugee populations. But when I compared this current one with the previous one, again with refugee youth in Turkey, I actually see that many of the problems are the same. So only difference may be the effects of war traumas. So in the previous one, the refugees were mostly newcomers, and they had more mental health problems because of the recent traumas that they experienced. But now this one, with this one, most of the participants were already living in Turkey for more than 5 years. And we actually noticed more host country related problems. And actually, it's interesting to see that when refugees move to another country, yes, they are far away from physical traumas or other conflicts or difficulties in their origin country, but then they start experiencing problems in the host country with accessing services, healthcare, education, access to employment opportunities, etc. And we actually, as researchers, realize that they are as important as the problems in their origin country. I was also involved in some mental health research, and it's interesting to see that the problems in the host country with increased the stigma and discrimination is also more. It increased when compared to the previous years. And the effects of stigma and discrimination, the problems with education, healthcare, employment, etc., they are as important as their traumas in their original country. And it's very important to do these kind of research and to inform policymakers, decision makers, and service providers so that their life in the host country gets better with these research, and then by doing advocacy, and then of course by creating real change for their lives.
Well, thanks for that, Özge. I think that's such an interesting perspective to say that the stigma is increasing. So on the one hand, you would think that the integration probably improves, and I'm going to have a question for Professor Karabey on that. but you're thinking that the stigma increases maybe in the first few years. The displaced population is more welcome because it's seen as a temporary thing. They are going to go home, they are going to leave, and now we are in the 10th year of this problem, or in the 9th year of this problem. The local population starts to have some resentment. So it's a very complex thing, where on the one hand you hope that there is integration, and then on the other hand you have this reaction from the local population. So Professor Karabe, I was going to ask you, so you obviously your experience working also on youth and refugee youth, this idea of integration, you are a Syrian young person, and you're coming to Turkey, and it's a completely different language. It is to some extent a similar culture, part of the Muslim world, but you are unable to speak, and the languages are very different. I mean, I speak Arabic and I don't understand Turkish. So after a certain time, you mentioned in your presentation that youth have a higher tolerance for language, easiness to acquire this language. Does that help for integration? And in what ways would you say that this has maybe increased their access to healthcare, or because of the issues of stigma, it actually doesn't really make a difference?
Thank you, Yanis. Yes, as I said before, kids and young people are open to learn the language of host country, because first of all, they are going to schools, and so sometimes later it is easier to learn a new language for them. But learning a language, of course, is not enough by itself. For instance, in Turkey, for Syrian refugees, all public services are open in terms of education, health, social services, etc., etc. But it is not enough to access to all of those services, because discrimination is invisible obstacle. Um, for instance, if you, as a, let's say, a Syrian young people, when you go to hospital and when you see the face of the healthcare workers, a doctor or a nurse, and he or she doesn't like you, then of course it is an obstacle and a barrier to access the health services. It is a very traumatic process. And so there are many examples like that. And also, the host community may see that the origin of many problems, many economical problems, for instance, finding job, the high rate of jobless, for instance, they may see the reason is the refugees. They came and we have lost our jobs, for instance. It is very common saying in Turkey. And also there are many false common ideas among the community. For instance, they can believe that the state give a lot of financial support to refugees, even they don't work, they don't do anything. Of course, it is impossible. Any state is not rich for doing that. And so there are many visible or invisible barrier to access to some services. Even in these days, in pandemic days, you can see some news in the newsletter, in the magazines. There are some photos from the district of refugees area in Istanbul, and it is written that look at those refugees. They don't wear even mask, but it is not difficult from the host communities. Of course, many young people don't wear the mask. The reason is different, but anyway, there is a reason. There is another reason for discriminating, and so you can, yeah, witness some kind of those things.
That's so important, and obviously it is not limited just to the cases of refugees in Turkey. This idea of discrimination, any group in any country, what in my opinion would work is a really strong campaign of communication to try to destroy these false messages, these false ideas, for example, that, you know, the refugees are getting all of this money without working anything, because it creates literally tension with the host community for no reason. And you know, social media campaigns involving maybe famous people, politicians to some extent, to make sure that these messages get across, and because it is in the interest of nobody if there are tensions. I mean, look at, and this is a sidestep now, but look at what's happening in France for the last week. There's a huge tension between, you know, a more radical Muslim community and then the French, and it's just very atrocious what's been going on. And just more communication and more understanding between the different parties involved to understand each other's perspective. So on that note, I want to go to Damla, because you know, her presentation about the interaction between local youth and refugee youth. So you said that you found it to be very useful, and you gained something very insightful out of this experience. What would you recommend for older people like us, or, you know, at some point when you become a policymaker? How do you take that experience and try to make it broader, to involve more people? Because unfortunately, for logistical reasons, funding reasons, we could not, you know, involve 800,000 refugee youth and 800,000 Turkish youth. So what would you say you would recommend to make this more broad?
Oh, actually, thank you. Actually, the participation of young people from, you know, another process of making policies or such a thing is important. But in Turkey and all over the world, young participation is so low in political area or another area. And I think, and actually yesterday I said the thing, I'm sick and tired of being an old man in the political area, and we need some young faces, and we need to you know, voices heard actually, but they don't care about us. We feel like that they see me as a threat actually, because we cannot vote for their party and another thing. And I think we can use social media to, you know, share our messages. We can, I don't know, political figure maybe use social media to use young participation and youth-friendly messages. And yeah, this is all in my mind.
Messages of inclusion, and maybe creating,
Yeah.
you know, Facebook groups, as Firas was mentioning earlier,
Yeah.
to try to disseminate these positive messages rather than the messages of hate and discrimination and you know, you are the other and you are the one who's intruding. So hopefully, you will be helping this movement because we definitely need it. So now we are going to move to the last theme with Firas, which is COVID-19. And I'm really curious to learn what UNHCR has been doing in the face of this pandemic to give an extra level of assistance to the refugees and the migrants. Is there anything in particular that maybe we can learn from UNHCR?
Of course, I mean, since the start of the pandemic, UNHCR stepped up its activities and with the governments, with the host governments to be able to respond to the situation. And like I said, refugees suffered from the same restrictions, if not more, that were placed on the local population in any population. And in fact, their mobility and ability to seek protection and assistance is even more restricted because of the closure of borders, an inability to go and move to another country. Refugees, by definition, are people who have left their countries of origin and sought protection and in another country. So we've, of course, all over the world, we worked with our partners, with the UN agencies, with the humanitarian agencies, with local communities, providing the basic equipments that are needed, such as masks and protective equipments and sanitizers and everything. But also we worked on increasing the health situation and the health access of refugees to the local community and to the remote clinics that I mentioned. But here, very important point that I want to mention in this regard, but it's also linked to the point that you made earlier and the panelists made earlier about how refugees are viewed in the community. We've seen in this pandemic so many positive examples of refugees who have medical degrees, who have background in nursing, who have background in all sorts of medical professions, stepping up and volunteering all over the world in order to help the local community they live in to support the health activities and the activities to combat and fight COVID. And in fact, governments have realized that refugees can actually provide a valuable contribution, many of them, because refugees are also just normal people like you and me. They can be doctors, they can be lawyers, they can be university professors, people with education, people with skills. And of course, using those skills is a contribution to the societies they live in. And with the times that we're living in, and I can tell you here in the United States, where there are so many refugees who were resettled from Iraq, from Syria, from elsewhere, who had background in medicine and nursing and health and parts and health sectors, who were working jobs, not in their previous professions, but who were working other jobs and now have been accepted and have received license to practice medicine and deliver and assist in the fight against COVID. So really, if we look at what the positive contribution that refugees can provide in COVID times and beyond, we can see that, in fact, refugees can bring in richness and contribution to the societies they're hosting. And the refugee population is extremely willing to provide those contributions to where they live. And we have so many examples from around the world on this, not just in the US, but also in Latin America and also in Asia. Again, the refugees are normal people that have gone and are going through normal times. And I have not seen more resilient population than the refugees in all my 20 years of work in this field. And once they find the solution, they would be grateful to the communities that hosted them while in transition and the communities that receive them. And they can provide in very valuable contribution where they are and where they would go in the future.
Firas, thank you so much for this very uplifting message. And I think this is a beautiful way to maybe conclude this this webinar today to remind us, of course, you know, normal people in a very abnormal situation, and they want to help, they can help, they just need to, you know, be integrated more. So on this, like I said, uplifting message, I want to thank all of the panelists for joining today, for their invaluable contribution, for giving all of their insights. And I want to thank also the audience members, both live today and also if you're watching this video at a later time. I want to conclude by saying again, thank you to the President's Global Innovation Fund for making this event and this project possible. So thanks again, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.